That wonderful feeling of waiting for something amazing to happen. Outside, the street lights began turning on in the getting dark sky. 3 o'clock was only minutes away now. I heard car doors slam outside my house. I checked how I looked one more time in the hallway mirror, making my hair look neat. Through the frosted glass door, I could see 3 shapes walking toward my front door. My heart was beating fast with excitement. I opened the door before they could knock, my face making a big welcoming smile. Tommy, Sarah, little Emma. Tommy stood on my doorstep, wearing a black coat that made him look like he was going to a funeral. His face looked serious and distant. No smile, no hug for his dad. Hello, Dad. His voice had none of the warmth from our morning phone call. Sarah pushed past him, smelling like expensive perfume. Her eyes looked angry, and her mouth was set in a mean line. Behind them, little Emma looked scared and confused, holding her mother's hand tightly. Come in, come in, I said loudly. I've got dinner ready, and that grape juice you love, Sarah. And Emma, I bought strawberry cakes just for you. We won't be staying for dinner, Sarah said in a sharp voice as she walked into my living room without being invited. Her smart eyes were already looking at my furniture, my things, like she was counting how much they cost. She touched my wife's pretty flower vase like it was cheap trash. Such ugly flowers, she said in a mean voice. I blinked, feeling confused and hurt. I bought Emma's favorites, the yellow roses she always loved. Dad, we need to talk. Tommy finally looked at me, but his eyes were as cold as winter rain. Sit down now. Sarah had pulled out her phone and was taking pictures of my kitchen, my dining room. The camera made clicking sounds over and over. I watched her, feeling very confused. What's she doing? I asked, checking how much the house is worth. Tommy said like it was perfectly normal. She sat down in my dead wife's favorite chair like she owned it already. My daughter's family is going to live here now, so get out. The words hit me like someone had punched me in the stomach. I grabbed the back of the couch to keep from falling down. What? I don't understand. Where am I supposed to go? This is MY House. I've lived here for 25 years. Tommy's voice cut to my confused words like sharp ice. Go live in a cheap motel if you want. We need this house. Emma needs space for her toys. Sarah moved closer to me, and her breath smelled like wine. We already talked to the police. Don't make any trouble for us. I stared at my son, looking for any sign of the boy I'd raised, the man I'd loved with all my heart. Nothing. He looked at me like I was a stranger he didn't like. Tommy, please, I whispered. I don't understand what's happening. Is this about money? If you need help, I can... You're leaving tonight. Sarah's voice was final and mean. We'll give you 30 minutes to pack your important stuff. My legs felt weak. I fell onto the couch, my mind spinning around and around. The strawberry cake sat on the dining table, not eaten. The grape juice stayed cold and untouched in its pretty bottle. Everything I had prepared with such hope seemed to be laughing at me now. This is my home, I said so quietly I could barely hear myself. Tommy finished taking pictures and put his phone away. Not anymore, Dad. Sarah is my wife now. Family takes care of family. The irony wasn't lost on me. I looked around the room at 25 years of memories, at the life I'd built with my dear wife who died, at the home where I'd raised Tommy with so much love. Now they stood in my living room, like robbers dividing up my whole life. I looked at Tommy's face one more time, this young man who called me just 5 hours ago, who'd spoken of moving in and important things, who'd let me believe for one afternoon that I still mattered to him. Something cold settled in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something much more dangerous. Planning and thinking. All right, I said very quietly. The room went completely silent. They'd expected me to cry, to beg, to fall apart completely. Sarah's eyebrows went up in surprise. Tommy's mean attitude became a little unsure. I stood up, walked to the closet, and pulled out my old brown suitcase. I'll pack some things. The silence stretched between us like a tight rope. They'd expected tears, begging, maybe screaming and yelling. Instead, I walked to my bedroom with the careful planning that had helped me through 35 years of teaching difficult children and solving hard problems. All right, I'll go. My voice surprised him because it was calm and steady. But remember, I said while folding my clothes, I've been a teacher my whole life. I know how to teach lessons. I folded my best shirts with careful precision, but I also know how to give punishments when children are very, very bad. Tommy shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot. What do you mean by that, Dad? I looked up from my packing, meeting his eyes for the first time since they'd arrived. Nothing, my son. Just wishing you happiness in your new home. From the living room, Sarah's voice was sharp and victorious, finally showing some sense. I continued packing. Bank papers from the filing cabinet, insurance documents, the deed to the house. Though what good it would do me now, I didn't know yet. Behind those, my teaching certificates and work papers, 35 years of careful record keeping. Tommy stayed in the doorway, watching me pack. Perhaps some small part of him felt guilty and bad. But when Sarah called his name from the kitchen, he turned away from his father. I packed my wife Helen's photograph last, the one from our anniversary dinner 2 years ago. Her smile was full of warmth that seemed impossible in this cold house full of people who share my blood but not my heart. 25 minutes. That's all it took to pack a whole lifetime. I rolled the suitcase through the living room, where my family, my former family, watched me like hungry birds watching a dying animal. Sarah had started taking more pictures, now focusing on the more expensive things I owned. The water and electric bills are in my name. I said quietly, "You'll need to change them to your names." "We'll handle everything," Tommy replied without looking up from his phone. I stopped at the front door, looking at the faces of people I'd loved, supported, and given everything to. Tommy wouldn't look at me. Sarah was examining my wife's glass collection with greedy eyes. Little Emma had started crying softly. Well then, I picked up my suitcase handle more tightly. I guess this is goodbye. None of them said anything back to me. The evening air felt sharp against my face. April in Dallas carried spring's warmth, but something about the cool night air cleared my thoughts and made them sharper. I put the suitcase in my old Toyota's trunk, the car Helen and I had bought together 4 years ago. Still working good, still doing its job. I drove through neighborhoods that I knew so well, but didn't feel like home anymore. Past the elementary school where I'd taught hundreds of children, past the park where we'd celebrated Tommy's high school graduation, past the grocery store where I'd shopped for tonight's rejected dinner. The ATM machine glowed bright white in the parking lot of a 24-hour gas station. I put in my card with steady fingers, checking my bank account balance. Teacher's pension money, Social Security payments, savings from 35 years of careful living. Not rich, but enough money, probably more than they'd expected me to have. The Sunset Motel sat along a busy street 10 minutes from my old neighborhood. Cheap rooms, but clean enough. The desk worker, a young man with tired eyes, took my information without asking questions. Cash payment for 5 nights. Room 158. The room smelled like strong cleaning soap and had everything needed for staying alive temporarily. 1 bed, small table, television, bathroom with thin towels and tiny soap bars. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my old laptop computer. Time to solve a problem. Morning light came through the motel's thin curtains, bright and unfamiliar. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then yesterday's betrayal crashed back into my mind like freezing water. I opened my laptop and signed into my online bank account. The numbers glowed steady on the screen. Teachers' pension deposits, Social Security money. 35 years of careful saving, more than enough for what I needed to do next. Then I looked at the joint account Tommy, and I had opened, when he was 17 years old, his first bank account for college. My name was still listed as the main owner. He'd never taken me off. Probably forgot it even existed. The balance made me smile for the first time in 20 hours. 30 years I gave and gave and gave, I said to the empty room. Time to take back everything that belongs to me. I closed the laptop and took a shower in the motel's small bathroom. The hot water felt like clarity washing over me. No more confusion. No more hurt feelings. Just careful planning applied to a very specific problem. By 9 o'clock, I was standing in Electronics World's bright fluorescent aisles. The young worker with blue hair barely looked up from her phone. "I need a prepaid phone," I told her, something basic, "and a cheap laptop for travel." She led me to the electronics wall, pointing out choices with practiced boredom. I picked a simple flip phone and a basic laptop, both paid for with cash money. No credit cards, no electronic trail, leading back to Harold Jenkins. "Setting up a home office?" she asked, making conversation while she rang up my purchase. "Remote work," I replied. "Consulting and teaching." Close enough to the truth. The real estate office was in a converted house on Wilson Avenue. Janet Martinez, according to her name sign, looked up from her computer with the bright smile of someone who made money from helping people. "How can I help you today?" "I need a small apartment, 1 bedroom, month-to-month rental if possible." I sat in the chair across from her desk. "I work online, so good internet is very important." Her fingers moved fast across the keyboard. "What's your budget?" I named a number that made her smile get bigger. "Not expensive, but comfortable. The kind of renter landlords liked." "I have several good options. This apartment on Pine Street has very fast internet. Perfect for remote work. When can I move in?" "Today, if possible." She blinked in surprise. "That's very quick. But I like people who know what they want." 2 hours later, I signed papers for a clean 1-bedroom apartment 8 blocks from my former home. Close enough for watching, far enough to avoid accidental meetings with my former family. Janet handed me the keys with professional efficiency. "The internet should work by tomorrow morning. Anything else you need to know about this area?" "Just where to find good coffee." She laughed and recommended 2 cafes within walking distance. The apartment smelled like fresh paint and new carpet. Empty rooms that echoed with possibility. I set my suitcase in the bedroom and put my laptop on the kitchen counter. The afternoon sun came through clean windows, lighting up dust specks that danced like tiny plans taking shape. I opened my new laptop and began making lists. Resources available, timeline requirements, information I needed, Phase 1 objectives. Outside, Dallas hummed with the ordinary business of ordinary people living ordinary lives. Inside, I began building something extraordinary, something they would never see coming until it was too late. I pulled out my phone, my OLD phone, and scrolled through Tommy's contact information. His work number, Sarah's cell phone, their friends' addresses, which was now my former address. So much information, so many weak spots I could attack. I cracked my knuckles and started typing on my laptop. Wednesday morning came with the methodical precision I'd always used for complex teaching projects and difficult students. My apartment had changed overnight into something that looked like a command center. 3 file folders set arranged on the kitchen table, each one labeled with a name: Tommy, Sarah, Emma. I opened my laptop and began writing down what I already knew. Tommy's work address, his favorite lunch places, his predictable daily routines, Sarah's job location, and her after-work patterns. Their temporary address, my former address, but I had gaps in my knowledge. I needed specifics, weaknesses, pressure points I could push. Thursday evening found me drinking a Coke at the Golden Star Casino's bar. The bartender, a friendly woman named Lisa with gray streaks in her hair, kept the conversation going as smoothly as the drink she poured. "That guy Tommy comes here a lot?" I asked, pointing toward the poker tables where my son sat hunched over his cards. "Oh, yeah." Lisa's eyes followed where I was looking. "Lost quite a bit of money here these past few weeks. Says he'll pay up soon when he sells his dad's house." I sipped my Coke, watching Tommy's increasingly desperate hand movements as his chips disappeared. Sounds like he's confident about that sale. "Hope so. For his sake." Lisa lowered her voice like she was telling me a secret. "Some of these guys don't like waiting for their money, if you know what I mean." Tommy stumbled slightly, getting up from the table, his face red with alcohol and frustration. I took pictures of him from across the room with my new camera zoom lens. Clear shots of his condition, his behavior, his gambling companions. Evidence I could use later. Friday morning, I followed Tommy to his construction work site downtown. He worked for Miller Construction, a medium-sized company with offices in a glass building on 2nd Street. At 11 o'clock, he came out for what looked like a long lunch break. He wasn't alone. The woman was maybe 28, red hair, wearing a nice business suit that suggested she made more money than Tommy ever would. They walked close together, his hand sometimes touching her back in a way that spoke of secret romance rather than just friendship. I took pictures of them from across the street. Their body language, her hand on his arm, the kiss she gave him before they separated at her car. More evidence I could use. That afternoon, I visited the Dallas County Clerk's office. Public records showed the scope of Tommy and Sarah's financial disaster with clear precision. Failed investment in a food truck business. Tax problems totaling $28,000. A business license that had been suspended for not paying state fees. Tommy's family wasn't just desperate. They were drowning in debt. Back in my apartment that evening, I spread the photographs across my kitchen table next to printed documents and handwritten notes. Tommy's gambling debts and promises about house sale money. His affair with someone who clearly had money to lose if exposed. Sarah's complete dependence on her husband's already compromised income. Little Emma's need for stability that her parents were destroying. Each folder now contained enough ammunition to destroy its subject completely. I leaned back in my chair, studying the evidence with a teacher's satisfaction. Structural weaknesses identified, weak points located. The foundation of their victory over me had more cracks than they realized. My phone buzzed. The old phone with Tommy's contact information still working. Time to begin the demolition. Saturday morning brought the same methodical clarity I'd always applied to difficult teaching problems. I spread the intelligence files across my kitchen table one more time. This time not for studying, but for action sequence planning. Tommy first. Financial pressure would create immediate panic. Sarah second. Job investigation would consume her already limited resources. Their marriage third. The gambling debts and affair provided multiple pressure points I could push. Little Emma fourth. Her complete dependency meant she'd suffer when the others fell apart. By 10 o'clock, I was sitting across from David Martinez, the branch manager at First Community Bank, the same bank where Tommy and I had opened his first checking account 15 years ago. I need to change the access permissions on this joint account, I told him, sliding the paperwork across his desk. David looked at the documents with professional efficiency. These account changes will take effect immediately, Mr. Jenkins. You're making yourself the primary account holder with approval requirements for large withdrawals. Perfect. Please notify me of any access attempts. He nodded, making notes in the computer system. Would you like to set specific withdrawal limits for the secondary account holder? Yes. $50 daily maximum. Anything larger requires my written approval. Tommy would discover the restrictions the next time he tried to pay rent or buy groceries. The panic would be immediate and complete. After lunch, I found myself in the downtown office of Patricia Collins, attorney at law. Her degrees cover one wall like certificates of competence, which I found reassuring and encouraging. I invested $31,000 in improvements to that house over the past 8 years, I explained, showing her the receipts I'd carefully saved. New air conditioning, bathroom remodeling, kitchen renovation, all documented. Patricia studied the paperwork with a thoroughness that justified her hourly rate. You have legal rights to this house, Mr. Jenkins. You've invested significant money in the purchase and improvements. Excellent. But first, I want them to understand their mistake themselves. She looked up from the documents, curiosity flickering in her professional expression. What do you mean by that? They took my house, thinking I was helpless. I prefer they realize how wrong they were before I take legal action. That's an interesting approach, but your legal position is strong whenever you decide to proceed. Good. I'll be in touch when the timing is right. My final stop was the Texas Department of Revenue building on Commerce Street. The clerk, a tired-looking woman in her 40s, accepted my manila envelope without particular interest. Anonymous submission of potential tax irregularities, she confirmed. Yes, Tommy Jenkins and Sarah Jenkins, homeowners. Documentation of unreported gambling income, questionable deductions, and suspicious financial activity. She stamped the envelope and filed it in a basket marked "Investigation Required." Government bureaucracy would handle the rest with its own methodical precision. Back in my apartment by 4:30, I poured myself a glass of wine. Something I rarely did, but the occasion seemed to warrant celebration. Outside my window, Dallas's evening lights began flickering on like tiny promises of what was to come. The first moves were in play. Tommy would discover his financial restrictions within days. His tax investigation would begin within weeks. Sarah's job would become complicated with interest. I opened my laptop and began writing the next phase. Monday morning arrived with the precise timing I'd engineered. My phone buzzed with a text notification from the bank. Someone had tried to access the restricted account. Multiple attempts, actually. The timestamp showed 9:23 a.m. Tommy had discovered his new reality. I poured coffee and opened my laptop, checking the bank's online activity LG. 5 failed access attempts in 12 minutes. 3 phone calls to customer service. 1 request for immediate account review. All denied as planned. My phone rang at 10:45, Tommy's number. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message with the satisfaction of a teacher watching a perfectly planned lesson work. "Dad, it's Tommy. There's some kind of problem with our account. The bank says you restricted access. Please call me back immediately. This has to be a mistake." The second call came at 11:15. More desperate this time. "Dad, where are you? I can't pay rent. I can't buy groceries. My card was declined at the coffee shop in front of my coworkers. Please, whatever this is, we need to fix it now." I made lunch while the third call played. His voice cracked slightly on the word help. By afternoon, he'd apparently called Sarah. My surveillance equipment, a basic listening device I'd placed near their bedroom window during a reconnaissance visit, picked up pieces of their conversation through the old house's thin walls. "Dad's money is blocked." Tommy's voice carried the sharp edge of genuine panic. "How are we going to pay the mortgage?" Sarah's response came with the sound of afternoon drinking. "Stay calm, honey. We'll find a way out. Maybe we can sell something from the house. This can't be a coincidence." Her voice rose with each word. "The bank says access was restricted by the account holder. That means your dad did this on purpose. You think my father? No, he wouldn't know how to do this." I smiled at that comment. Tommy's underestimation would serve me well in the coming weeks. The mail arrived at 2:45. Among the usual bills and advertisements was an official envelope from the Texas Department of Revenue addressed to Tommy Jenkins at his work address. The tax investigation had begun, triggered by my anonymous submission. Tommy's phone rang at 3:30. I could hear his conversation through my device as he paced the kitchen of my former home. "Sarah, it's Tommy. We have a big problem. Multiple problems, actually." His voice carried exhaustion now, the panic settling into grim determination. "The tax office wants to audit our records, and Dad has somehow locked us out of our bank account." Sarah's response crackled through his phone speaker. "That's impossible. Your father doesn't have that kind of authority." The bank disagrees. They say he's a primary account holder and can restrict access whenever he wants. A long pause. Then Sarah's voice, much quieter. "Where is your father now?" "I don't know. He won't answer his phone. His old neighbor says she hasn't seen him since he left." Another pause. "Tommy, what exactly did we walk into that night?" She sank into the kitchen chair, Helen's old chair, and I could hear the creak of old wood through my listening device. "I'm starting to think we severely underestimated him." Wednesday morning brought the systematic precision of Phase 2. I arranged Tommy's compromising photographs across my kitchen table, like evidence in a court case. 8 high-resolution images of my son with his red-haired colleague, captured outside her apartment building, in her car, at a downtown restaurant during what should have been working hours. Beside them, documentation of his gambling debts, casino receipts, witness statements from bartenders, a pattern of financial irresponsibility stretching back months. 2 envelopes sat ready for delivery. One addressed to Miller Construction's Human Resources Department. One addressed to Sarah at her office job. By 9:45, Tommy's supervisor was reviewing an anonymous submission about employee gambling problems and questionable use of company time. The photos of Tommy drinking during lunch hours, the documentation of his debts, the witness statements about his desperate promises to pay up when the house sells. Miller Construction prided itself on reliability and family values. Tommy had become a liability. At 10:15, my listen device picked up Tommy's panicked phone call to Sarah from a Miller Construction parking lot. "They fired me." His voice cracked through surveillance equipment. Just like that, someone sent him information about my personal life. Sarah's response carried the sharp edge of someone already stretched too thin. What kind of information? Pictures of me at the casino, statements from people saying I owe money. They said I was a risk to company reputation. "Tommy, we can barely afford groceries. How are we going to survive without your paycheck?" But that conversation was interrupted by the mail carrier's arrival at Sarah's office. 2 hours later, my device captured a very different kind of conversation. "I know about your affair, Tommy." Sarah's voice had gone deadly quiet. "I want everything, half of everything we have left." The photographs had done their work. "Sarah, please let me explain. This isn't what it looks like. Photos don't lie, Tommy. You've been sneaking around with some woman while I'm trying to hold our family together. Honey, I was desperate. The gambling got out of hand, and she was just... After what we did to your father, and now this, you're just like him, a disappointment." The irony wasn't lost on me. Sarah comparing her cheating husband to the father they betrayed, not realizing that father was orchestrating her husband's destruction. Tommy's voice turned desperate. "This can't all be coincidence. First your dad's money gets locked up, then I lose my job. Now these photos show up. Someone's doing this to U.S. Who would even care enough to destroy us?" The silence that followed was beautiful in its implications. Even through my surveillance device, I could hear the moment when realization began to dawn. "Your father," Tommy whispered finally. "We threw out a man who spent 35 years learning how to solve problems methodically." Sarah's laugh carried no humor. "Dad couldn't organize a birthday party, let alone some elaborate revenge scheme. Then explain how our entire life fell apart in 1 week." I closed my laptop and poured myself an evening glass of wine. Tommy was broken professionally and personally. Sarah faced financial ruin and marital collapse simultaneously. Both were beginning to suspect the scope of their miscalculation. Tomorrow I will begin Phase 3. Friday morning arrived with the predictability of teaching principles. They would come for me today, desperate, coordinated, convinced that intimidation could accomplish what planning had not. I arranged my legal documents in neat stacks across the kitchen table. Bank statements, property investment receipts, attorney correspondence, everything legitimate, everything defensible. At 9:45, the knock came. Officer Rodriguez stood on my doorstep with the tired expression of someone handling a domestic dispute call. Behind him, I could see Sarah waiting in a patrol car, her face set in victorious anticipation. "Mr. Jenkins, we received a complaint about you." His voice carried professional skepticism. "The family says you've been threatening them. They want you to leave them alone." I opened the door wider, gesturing to the organized documentation. "I haven't broken any laws, officer. I'm simply protecting my legal rights as an account holder and property investor." Officer Rodriguez examined the bank correspondence, the attorney letters, the investment receipts. His expression shifted from official concern to mild annoyance. "These look legitimate. What exactly are they claiming you've done?" "Restricted access to my own bank account. Consulted an attorney about my property investments. Reported potential tax irregularities to the appropriate authorities." I handed him Patricia Collins's business card. "You're welcome to verify everything with my legal counsel." 15 minutes later, Officer Rodriguez delivered the verdict to Sarah. That would ruin her morning. No evidence of criminal activity, no basis for a restraining order, no police protection for people facing legitimate legal consequences of their own financial choices. She spent the afternoon walking door to door through my old neighborhood, a one-woman campaign of social destruction. "That man is dangerous. I heard her tell Mrs. Peterson through my surveillance equipment. He's threatening our family. Try and take our home away from U.S. Mrs. Peterson's response was predictably noncommittal. Has he actually done anything illegal, Sarah? Well, no, but... Then maybe you should talk to him directly instead of involving the whole neighborhood. Sarah's manipulation campaign yielded similar results at each house. Neighbors who'd known me for decades weren't easily convinced that quiet Harold Jenkins had suddenly become a community threat. By 2:30, Tommy had escalated to professional surveillance. Rick Martinez, private detective, parked his unmarked sedan across from my apartment building with the subtlety of a man accustomed to insurance fraud cases rather than systematic revenge operations. I photographed him from my window, noting his license plate and the telephoto lens he'd mounted for building surveillance. Amateur hour. I'd been anticipating professional investigations since the day I moved into the strategically located apartment. His presence actually simplified my next moves. Let him document my routine: grocery shopping, library visits, coffee shops. Let him waste Tommy's remaining money on surveillance that would reveal exactly nothing illegal or threatening. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Collins. Family attempted to file harassment complaint. Dismissed due to lack of evidence. All your activities remain within legal boundaries. Perfect. They were panicking exactly as I calculated. Desperate enemies make predictable mistakes, and Tommy's family was proving that teaching principle beautifully. Their coordinated counterattack had accomplished nothing except confirming their complete misunderstanding of the situation. I wasn't their angry relative striking out in emotional rage. I was their systematic opponent, and Phase 3 was about to demonstrate the difference. Saturday morning brought an unexpected wait. I sat surrounded by the evidence of my complete victory. Bank statements showing Tommy's restricted access. Photographs documenting his professional destruction. Tax investigation notices targeting his business empire. Everything I had planned had worked with teaching precision. So why did I feel so empty? While organizing my filing cabinet, I discovered a manila envelope I'd forgotten packing. Helen's letters to me during our brief separation 25 years ago, when we'd argued about Tommy's expensive private school tuition. I opened the first letter with hands that remembered her handwriting better than her voice. My darling Harold. She'd written in her careful script, anger makes us do things we regret later. I know you want to prove a point about money, but proving you're right won't make either of us happy. The words hit harder than I'd expected. Helen had always seen through my teaching solutions to the human problems underneath. Even when she was furious with me, she never lost sight of what mattered. I read letter after letter, each one revealing her gentle wisdom about family conflicts and forgiveness. In one she wrote, Harold, revenge never makes anyone happy, but justice is worth pursuing. There's a difference between making them pay and making things right. Making things right. The phrase echoed as I drove to Peaceful Gardens Cemetery. Helen's grave sat under an old maple tree, her headstone simple granite with dates that encompassed 32 years of marriage. I'd avoided visiting since the funeral 8 months ago, but today I needed her guidance more than pride. What would you do, sweetheart? I asked the headstone, feeling foolish but desperate. Would you forgive them or fight for justice? The wind rustled through the maple leaves, and I could almost hear her response. Not supernatural nonsense, just memories so clear it felt like conversation. You've already won, Harold. They know they can't intimidate you. They know they underestimated you completely. But destroying them won't bring our home back or heal Tommy's selfishness. I traced her name carved in stone. I've destroyed them completely. But it doesn't feel like victory. Memory supplied her gentle laugh. Because you're not a destroyer, sweetheart. You're a builder. You spent 35 years solving problems by creating solutions, not eliminating obstacles. The afternoon sun slanted through the branches, warming the granite beneath my fingers. Helen had always been right about these things. She'd seen me more clearly than I saw myself. The difference between my teaching mind and my father's heart. There's a difference between making them pay and making things right. I whispered, repeating her words from the letter. That evening, back in my apartment, I spread my legal documents across the kitchen table once more. But this time, I wasn't planning another systematic destruction. I was designing a different kind of solution, one that would restore justice without requiring vengeance. I opened my laptop and began typing a very different kind of document, a letter to Patricia Collins about legitimate legal action for property recovery. Phase 3 would still demonstrate the difference between them and me, but it would demonstrate something Helen would be proud of. Monday morning arrived with the clarity Helen's guidance had provided. I arranged my documentation in 3 organized stacks: property investment records, financial evidence, and criminal documentation. Everything legitimate, everything systematic, everything legal. At 8:45, I sat across from Detective Maria Johnson at the Dallas Police Department. She reviewed my materials with the professional thoroughness of someone who'd seen plenty of family disputes turn criminal. "Mr. Jenkins, you have sufficient evidence for criminal charges," she said, studying Tommy's tax documents. "Financial fraud, tax evasion, potentially conspiracy to defraud you of property investments." I handed her the photographs of Tommy's gambling activities. "I want justice through proper legal channels, not personal revenge." Her eyebrows rose slightly. "Most people in your situation would be screaming for blood. My wife taught me the difference between making people pay and making things right." Detective Johnson initiated the investigation immediately. By 10:15, arrest warrants were issued for Tommy Jenkins on tax evasion charges. The systematic approach that had served my private campaign now served legitimate justice perfectly. The emergency court hearing convened at 12:30. Judge Williams, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, reviewed my property investment documentation with professional efficiency. Mr. Jenkins invested $31,000 in improvements to this residence over 8 years. Patricia Collins explained to the court, "He has legal standing as a property CO owner." Judge Williams examined the receipts, the contractor invoices, the bank statements. The house is returned to the rightful owner. Defendants must vacate within 24 hours. The gavel's bang echoed like a teaching solution, clicking perfectly into place. By 2:15, the eviction notice was served. I watched from across the street as the sheriff's deputy handed the official court order to Sarah. Her face went through the same progression of emotions I'd seen 3 weeks ago. Shock, anger, desperate calculation. But this time she faced the full weight of legitimate authority, not just one wrong teacher. Tommy emerged from the house, my house, carrying a suitcase with the mechanical movements of someone in emotional shock. Sarah followed, her face carrying the hollow expression of a woman who'd lost everything through her own choices. They loaded their car in silence. No arguments, no threats, no desperate attempts at manipulation. Just a quiet acceptance of people who'd finally encountered consequences they couldn't intimidate, bribe, or charm their way around. Little Emma looked confused and scared, not understanding why they had to leave the big house with all her toys. At 4:30, I stood in my own front doorway for the first time in 3 weeks. The house felt different, not because they'd changed anything, but because I'd changed everything. The afternoon light slanted through the kitchen window, exactly as it had that first day, when Tommy called with a surprise. But now it illuminated justice restored through proper channels, not revenge extracted through systematic destruction. I picked up Helen's crystal vase from the dining room table. It had survived their occupation undamaged, just as my sense of right and wrong had survived my temporary descent into vengeance. Tomorrow Tommy would face his own choices about how to rebuild a life, without depending on money that was never really his. Tonight I was home. Friday morning arrived with the quiet satisfaction of justice properly served. I stood at the threshold of my house, my legally restored house, carrying only a single suitcase and 25 years of vindicated dignity. The locksmith had finished his work the previous evening. These were my keys now, legally and morally. Tommy's family had left evidence of their hasty departure. Food containers in the sink, magazines scattered across my coffee table. Sarah's expensive makeup abandoned on the bathroom counter. They'd treated my home like a temporary hotel, never understanding they were occupying someone else's life. I spent the morning systematically erasing their presence, not out of anger, but with the methodical precision Helen would have recognized. A teacher's approach to restoration: assess damage, prioritize repairs, execute solution. The afternoon brought new locks, a security system, and fresh flowers for Helen's crystal vase. The house began remembering who it belonged to. At 2:45, my phone rang. Tommy's number. Dad. His voice carried none of the entitled confidence I'd heard for weeks ago. Can we talk? I considered hanging up. Then I remembered Helen's lesson about the difference between justice and cruelty. We're talking now. I realize I was wrong. The words came haltingly, like admissions pulled from deep wounds. Everything's falling apart. Sarah's drinking again. I lost my job because of the gambling. I can't focus on anything. Little Emma keeps asking why we had to leave the big house. I'm sorry to hear that, Tommy. Are you really? The question caught me off guard with its naked honesty. Was I sorry, or was I simply satisfied that consequences had arrived exactly as engineered? Yes, I realized. I'm sorry. Sorry it came to this. Dad, forgive me, please. I know I hurt you, but I'm still your son. The silence stretched between us like the 22 days since he last called me family. Tommy, forgiveness is one thing, but trust is entirely different. You made your choice when you threw me out of my own home. Now live with IT. I can't survive without help. You survived 28 years learning to depend on me for everything. I finished gently. Now learn to depend on yourself. Dad, please. I spent 25 years giving you everything I had. My time, my money, my heart, my home. And the first moment it became convenient, you discarded all of IT. I paused, watching the afternoon light slant through my kitchen window. That taught me something valuable about what I was protecting. The line went quiet, except for his breathing. Goodbye, Tommy. I hung up. That evening, I poured wine, good wine, the kind I'd been saving for special occasions, and sat in Helen's favorite chair. The house felt different now, not just because Tommy's family's presence had been erased, but because it contained something new, self-respect restored through legitimate channels. Helen, I said to the empty room, I did this right. Justice prevailed. I could almost hear her gentle laughter, feel her approval in the familiar creaks of our home settling around us. The systematic opponent had become something better, a man who'd learned the difference between winning and being right. Outside, Dallas hummed with ordinary life. Inside, I began planning what to build next. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to Nasty Revenge, and share your thoughts about this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the video that appears on your screen. Thank you for watching Nasty Revenge.